There we go. Recording started. Thanks everybody for being here. Going to share my screen. Everybody should be able to see that okay. And we'll get started. Thanks for attending. Happy New Year. So our agenda is pretty much along the same lines that it has been in the past. Welcome, some ground rules for the public, go through some resources. Then we'll take a look at why we're here today, and that's to implement 25-002. And then we want to talk about the red lines that we have sent out, and we've made some edits since that last December 17th TAC meeting. And then discussion on adopting the 2024 ICC code set. We get these two things behind us that will put us in a really good shape to meet the rest of our meeting, the future meeting objectives, which is to get a complete set of draft rules and design criteria regions settled that we can get out to stakeholder groups and interested parties to make sure that we are on track with that. Then Andre and Shum's CODA team is going to give us an update on the survey results that they've received so far, which help guide that regional design criteria matrix that we're working on. And then we want to talk a little bit more about a couple of other very important things to this process. One is the audit procedures and the outline for that. Then the discussion for fire suppression and the winter design temps. Ground rules for the public. If this is your first meeting, thank you for attending. We do appreciate public input. We do hope all the interested parties are being able to attend as they want to. If you want to catch up on previous meetings, they all are recorded and on the Technical Advisory Committee website, along with the slide decks that we have done. We recommend typing your questions in the chat or virtually raising your hand if you'd like to speak. And then, of course, I have to give priority to the TAC members because this is a working body as we work forward to implementing Senate Bill 25-002. Any written comments that you have during the meeting or after the meeting can be sent to me at sam.albrecht@state.co.us. So the resources page has not changed since the last few meetings. These are hot links in the slide deck, so you can go to any TAC recording or the TAC page and get a copy of these slides. 25-002, the actual bill, signed bill itself. Our statutes are 2432, 3301 to 3329. That's available through LexisNexis. The administrative rules that we are currently revising, and the building codes and standards website, of course, has more information on factory built structures in the state of Colorado. And then the Technical Advisory Committee website, as I've already referenced, has all of the public meeting notices, as well as the recordings for these meetings and the slide decks. So I want to go through this. We flashed this up a time or two, but one of the things that we're working on and kind of work in progress to kind of give the Technical Advisory Committee members more information on, why the stuff out of the bill and where we are in trying to get this stuff implemented, right? So responsibility and accountability, that is a matrix that we're hoping to share on the January 21st TAC meeting. And we can start working through that. Now, we're not quite sure where we're going to put this responsibility matrix, whether we're going to plug it into the rules, whether we're going to throw it up onto the building codes and standards website, maybe both places. But it's something that we've talked about since I've been here, is who's responsible for what to whom and when, right? So we think this is going to be a valuable tool wherever we end up landing with it and wherever we place it. It may be a work in progress for a while, but I think it's important And it is our intent to put some of that responsibility stuff, if we can, into the administrative rules and all those different chapters that I've got labeled there. Then in building contractor registration and education, of course, this is new out of 002. We are exploring education platforms and partnerships. We're drafting specs for what that education may look like. And we are looking for vendors or providers for that education. And we'll keep everybody updated on that. That'll go into chapter 6, rule 6 on the building contractors. And then we did complete the survey of the TAC members on what they thought was important to the survey of topics for the topics to be included in that contractor education. Third-party agency plan review, approval, and audits by DOH. As you know, a big change in 002 allows third-party agencies to be the final plan approval authority for construction to begin on the construction plans and for factory-built structures in the state of Colorado. We are going to work on how that looks like, what that looks like with respect to audits and the percentage that we audit. And then we're just going to require registration of the third-party agencies that are actually doing that, so that we have that documentation on where we're going to, who we're going to look to be responsible when we do those audits. Overall, I want to pause here and say that we did discuss in a previous TAC meeting that the audit details will be in an audit handbook that we are working on. And like I mentioned, we're going to be rolling that out in the next couple meetings for folks to take a look at. Audit processes for seller contracts and down payments. That, of course, will go into Rule 9 in the sellers section of the administrative rules. And then the regional design criteria, we are going to incorporate the survey data and make sure we are capturing everybody's most restrictive requirements, so that we can design those regions, design criteria regions, into what makes sense from a state of Colorado unique geographic and location requirements, and accommodate as best we can the manufacturer's cost of production into each of those design criteria regions. And that's going to be, we're hoping to do a survey of the manufacturers very soon, and actually may have an interested party meeting with the manufacturers. Of course, we'll invite all the TAC members also to that, if they want to attend, and it's kind of laid out where we are. We know we have good representation here on the TAC from manufacturers, but what we want to make sure that we do is that we listen to those manufacturers on where they think those design criteria region breaks are, right? So region 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's the big part of that. And we'll attach it's the end of it's our goal at the end of getting that design criteria region table done, is to make that an appendix to the administrative rules, so it can be referenced back up into the body of the rules. Now, last week, or 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, the last meeting, I asked if there was any concerns with the rules as we were laying them out, knowing that they were very draft, and that we're still doing edits and we're still making some changes to those. I'm going to try to go through what we have done from the last red line that we sent out to this red line, so that we kind of understand where we're what we've done and what holes we still have to plug, right? So we've still got a few holes to plug. Like, for example, the design criteria regions are not set yet. We know where we want to put them. We know we're getting survey data in, but that's not done yet. What I want to pause and do after each rule, which is basically a chapter of the administrative rules, right? Sometimes I use the word chapter, but it's rule one and its sub rules, right? Is to say, hey, are we on the right track with this rule 1, 2 through 10 as moving forward? Otherwise, because that's going to give us that foundation that we just make the edits, red lines going forward. We have till March to work out the final red line. But if I have to restructure the entire format, then that's going to take more time and more staff time to work out and make more back and forth with folks that want it to change. So feel free to pop in and say, hey, you know, I have concerns about this area of this rule or that area of that rule. That's what we want to hear. If you don't have any big objections, then we'll just keep rolling with what we've got. I'm assuming that unless you speak up or send me comments after the meeting, that we are on the right track to move this thing forward. All right. Does everybody understand that? Does anybody have any questions on that? Cam, you asked a question about will red lines be sent to everyone or to TAC members only? Yes, we will send what we will do is we'll put the draft red lines up on the website and we will send a notice to everybody that they can download from the website and take a look. And we'll do that through our newsletter. Cam, if you're not getting our newsletter, I'm pretty sure you are. Please make sure that you take a look at the maybe Heather can pop in the newsletter sign up, or Michelle can into the chat so that everybody can sign up for the newsletter, because that's how we will communicate to everybody beyond the TAC meetings. And then once we get the final red lines done, we will have interested parties meetings on the red lines, right? So rather than invite the entire universe of manufacturers, third-party agencies, installers, building contractors, registered sellers, what we have done in the past and what we will probably do is in February, we will start having interested party meetings on the draft rules as we have them. So we'll invite all the manufacturers together to talk about where we are in the red lines. Now that's in addition to the table that we're going to try to present very specifically to manufacturers. But in the past, we've done like 4 different interested party meetings for red line changes. And then, as you know, the adoption of the rules is done by the State Housing Board, and that is a public meeting and then allows public testimony. What I want to get to, though, is that the universe as I know it has had every chance to provide input, and that's TAC members, because they have to recommend the rules to the State Housing Board, and interested parties like Cam, for yourself as a manufacturer, that you've seen those red lines. What I don't want is somebody to come forward to at the State Housing Board meeting and say, hey, I never saw this, right? Or I have concerns about this and this. You can, because it's a public meeting and I'm not trying to squash any public comment for the record, but there will also be an opportunity to send in written comments and changes to the administrative rules. Now, I go through this in detail about this time in the administrative rule process because we're getting down to the last 4 or 5 meetings of the TAC. Then we'll have our interested parties meetings, and then we have the State Housing Board meeting, right? So I want to make sure everybody has a chance to provide input. or at least have the opportunity to review those rules and make any suggestions that they have. All right. Any other questions, Cam? I grabbed your question in the chat. Any other questions or concerns about the process moving forward? All right. So these next few slides, we're going to run through this chapter by chapter, and we're going to stop and have a discussion on the 2024 code set. I promise we will have time to have Andre and Shums Code look at we'll look at their slides and their results of the survey so far. And if we get to the rest of the agenda, that's great. If not, those are the key things I want to take away today. I've also added a slide toward the end of the presentation on what I hope to get done at the remaining meetings, what we have to get done at the remaining meetings, right? So that will help us, hopefully help keep us on track. So rule one, we added a definition, and this isn't the point where we're going to stop at rule after rule, but just kind of give you a summary of the changes that we are putting forward for consideration going forward. This is the summary pages of this. It's 2 pages, and then we'll go into it rule by rule. Codes and standards, we changed some wording on the accessibility. We'll talk about the wildfire resiliency code, emergency response units, and the G5 standard, right? Rule 3, we've updated the fee schedule a little bit. Rule 4, we've moved third-party agencies to the new chapter to accommodate regional zones. We've removed the 3-year registration and accommodate the third-party agency final plan approval. The Rule 5 is the new chapter for third-party agencies. Rule 6 is the building contractors. Rule 7 is local governments. That's a new chapter. We've had a couple meetings with the local government teams to talk about their chapter. Some other Colorado state agencies that's Rule 8. Local governments, we've pulled that out as its own chapter now. And then Rule 8, other Colorado state agencies. Rule 9 is the sellers. We've added audits to the sellers. Rule 10 is the installers. Business entity is already in rulemaking 1, which is going to have a State Housing Board meeting on January 20th and be effective March 17th. We're going to add audits to the installers, foundations, no major changes to that rule. And then Rule 12, enforcement, we're going to clarify adding post-audit enforcement requirements. And then, like I mentioned, the Appendix A will be the design criteria regional table. Okay, rule by rule. We added the emergency response unit. As some of the TAC members know, we added this during the City of Denver's declaration of emergency on homelessness. And we worked with the local jurisdiction to amend our rules to allow cooperating with the local government in the case of an emergency. Now, if it's a statewide emergency, the governor's declaration will overrule anything that we might do. We can then, of course, work with the locals. We may still want to put an emergency unit tag on those structures, but that is we did not put the definition in when we did this a couple years ago. So we thought, since it was referenced, there's an insignia for ERUs. We wanted to clarify the definition of that. Any questions on that? Any other definitions you guys think that we need to add or change to Rule 1? This is easy. Any other changes to Rule 1? There's a question in the chat. Maybe Michelle, if you could answer that on which checkbox under the Division of Housing includes a newsletter. or if that link signs up just to the Building Codes and Standards newsletter. Rule 2, this is the Building Codes and Standards ones, right? This is where we look at our adoption of the ICC codes, the other standards that we've looked at that we have added, the ICC MBI 1200, 1205, 1210, the standard for G6, which was advanced panelization, and we're recommending, and we've discussed, adding G5 for the safe use of ISO containers. IBC Chapter 11 accessibility, we're clarifying that in the red line that we have to be within within the last two published code sets. And then we've talked a lot about the Wildfire Resiliency State Code and map, and we're recommending adoption of the Wildfire Resiliency State Code and the map and any local maps approved by the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. There is one other thing that we're working on with the Wildfire Resiliency Board, and that is, I'll just share with you that there may be another 2.21.2 that says that if the state map or the local map splits a lot within for the placement of a factory-built structure, that we will consider the entire lot to be required to be structured hardening to the most restrictive of that. I think that's the way most, I talked to Marguerite yesterday with the Wildfire Resiliency Code team, and she said most locals are saying, yeah, if it splits a lot or splits a parcel, that they're going to just make it the most restrictive within the of the two. We clarified in Rule 2 that in emergency response units and the modifications for any emergency response units, because those are not built to a normal ICC, they're code set, they're built to a modified one. So what we wanted to be very clear on is that if let's say these sleeping shelters approved for the city and county of Denver moves to Elbert County for some other use, that everyone knows, including us, that those are originally designed in our emergency response units, and that a change in use needs to be approved by the local jurisdictions. And that if any of those are installed as one or multifamily dwellings, that they follow our installation requirements. Okay, before we jump into the 2024 code set, any other concerns with what I've laid out for Rule 2? Okay. Discussion time, 2024 code set. Took a straw poll. We took a straw poll at the last meeting, and there was not anybody that seemed to be opposed to the 24 code set. There were several that were in favor of moving to the 2024 code set, but I would now like to just see if there's been more thought or processing on that request, because this drives the design criteria regions because of some of the changes. I do have pro and slides on the 2024 code set, but as you know, we went to the 2021 code set effective 1/1/25. So we've been on that for a little over a year, and there was state statute that drove that change. And now we're looking at the 2024 code set to actually prevent changes and allow the manufacturers to have targets for what we hope will be multiple years before we do code set, another code set change. I'm going to go through these pros and cons a little bit, and then we will jump into discussion. But please let me know if there's any concerns. So there's a little bit of a difference. Well, with respect to accessibility, that would put us on the most recently published. So certainly we would be okay with if there are any changes in 27. And we'd be good until 2030 on accessibility. The energy part does lower some ceiling insulation in 24. Insulation trade-off and ceiling assemblies increase prescriptive requirements in other places. Tracy, we still owe a discussion with you. We talked to the Colorado Energy Office yesterday. They believe if we go to the 2024 code set, and if that the only requirement, the statutory requirement from their side is that we meet or exceed the 21 code set. So there may be a carve out for tiny homes that they can be either meet the IECC 21 or 24 because of, and we're looking at that. So if there's any concerns on tiny homes going to either 21 or 24 in their construction drawings, let me know. Wind and snow, changing to 24 allows us to use the most current regional design criterias and the reference standards that go with that. So that is a plus, but the con is that it does change some wind and snow loads around the state. Plan approval, we think as you know, one of the changes that we're making in the Rule 4 for manufacturers is that a plan, once it is built to the regional design criteria zone, that it is good until we change the regional design criteria regions. Okay. And then tornado, not applicable to the entire state, but there is an overlay in the 24 code set. Seismic categories, some pros and cons. We can go into those if there's more concerns. And then rain loads. This one has a similar pro and con. It changes a little bit from 21 to 24. Overall, I think I've summarized it at the front of this. I'm not going to go through this. We think moving to the 24 code set will prevent some future code changes and allow plans to be valid for a longer period of time. Now, with that said, any other discussion, any other concerns from moving to 21 to 24? Any other comments on moving from 21 to 24? Anything that we've not yet factored into our analysis? All right, then I am going to assume that TAC is okay with recommending to the State Housing Board to change to the 2024 code set. Is that right? Cam, thumbs up from you, I think, on that. Thank you. Some other thumbs up floating across the screen. Thank you.
Yep. Good from my perspective, Sam.
Wayne, go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, good to move forward with 2024
Okay,
in
cool.
my mind.
Thank you, Wayne. Okay, that's what we'll do.
Moving on
Thank you so much.
2024.
I just want to stop and thank you guys. I know this is important to the industry. I know it's I don't take a code set change lightly, as you can tell. We we think it'll work out just fine though. Thank you. Okay. Any other concerns with Rule 2? Rule 3, fees. Please take a look in those draft rules, the red lines that we've sent out on the new fee structure. We did change since the last one. There was a independent inspector fee of $450, which lasted 3 years. We've changed that to an annual fee of $200. And we've added some clarification on late registration fees. Any other concerns with Rule 3 at this point? Okay. Rule 4, summary of the changes. Some of these we've already talked about. We've deleted the 3-year registration. When we originally put in the 3-year registration, it was to allow the plan set to be good until the end of the registration period. Now we're tying it to the code changes. And then plans must use the design criteria zones and just a flag region. Zone 5 is going to be site specific. And so there is room within these design criteria regions or zones to allow every factory built structure a home within that table. Approved plan must be submitted for each asset. All third-party agency information is moved to Chapter 5 and audit section added. Any questions on Rule 4? Okay. Specifically, these are the red lines that we put in there, that the approved plans must use the adopted regional design criteria, and they are considered approved until the adopted regional design criteria are amended by the State Housing Board through a formal rulemaking process and published in the Colorado Register. Tawny, you asked a question. I have no problem with you sending those slides out to the for your member feedback. I'm going to consider that we have had the discussion on adoption. If there is a lot of negative feedback on that, please let's pull together a meeting and let's have that discussion. Okay. Cam, you asked if we're still doing factory registration and certifications for 3 years. No, we're changing the registration. The 3-year registration was just 3 times fee wise was just 3 times the annual registration fee. We're going back to the annual registration and tying the plan approval to the 3-year period. I'm sorry, to the building codes that allows them to stay in compliance until we change the design criteria. Before, every plan set used to expire at the end of the registration period for the manufacturer. So every manufacturer had to resubmit plans with their new registration period. We heard that was a burden on the manufacturers, and we resolved it with the 3-year registration period. Now we're tying it to the code set. Tony, the other thing I was going to say is if you want to do a interested party meeting on just a 24 code change with your members, let us know. We'd be happy to accommodate. Any other questions or concerns with Rule 4 as we've proposed? Okay. Rule 5, third-party agencies. New chapter, basically cut out everything that was in Rule 4 before and moved into its own chapter. We see 3 categories for registration of third-party agencies. They must select whether they're doing in-plant certification and inspections, plan review, or I guess it could be on-site inspections, and then we clarified that it's one registration per team or unit, business unit. What we want to make sure is that with those third-party agencies, we have the list of the current personnel doing those functions and their credentials to make sure that we have the right information necessary to move forward. We added audits of third-party agencies in here also, and then we're trying to incorporate the standard 1205 where it talks about third-party agency responsibilities. Any questions there? We also added it back in. We had it in, we took it out, then we added it back in. After we looked through there, third-party agencies now can become certified. And we, after 3 successful audits without any life safety audit findings or repeated discrepancies. And then we broke that out by type, of course, the in-plant construction inspections, plan reviews, and then on-site inspections. And then if, as a complaint investigation, the division may request inspection records from the third-party agencies as necessary. Everybody okay with the way we're moving forward with third-party agency and their own rule 5? Okay. Administrative rules, building contractors. This was new in the statute. The scope of that in the statute is on-site preparation work or on-site construction OC. And so we're going to require registration if they're not licensed by the local jurisdiction. And we are going to, if they register with the division, it's statewide, but it does not supersede the local jurisdiction registration requirements. The responsibilities, we've added language in there about that. And the education is going to be required of all contractors, whether they're licensed with the state or with a local building department. And then just some audit language if necessary and on that. We made that an annual registration in 6.1. In 6.3, we talk about the education, proof of factory built structure education provided by or through the Division of Housing or another division approved education provider. That education criteria is still being determined, but we're moving toward an on-demand type of system and maybe supplemented with face-to-face instruction. Cam, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, sorry. Just wanted to make sure I understand this. So if a building contractor is licensed in the jurisdiction of the project, they no longer need to be a registered installer with the state. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, that's not quite it.
That's not
Great question though. So if the building contractor is doing foundation work or other site prep work, maybe it's a big multifamily project with a lot of utility or street work or whatever else as part of their contract, right? Water, sewer. That is site prep. It could be for a individual home. It could be the foundation work. But the installer still needs to be registered separately with the program in order to do the actual installation of the unit on a foundation and the stitching between the different boxes and to finish that up, right? Now, if there are OC items to be done on site, that can also be done by a building contractor. And that piece of it is also going to require a business contractor If it's not the installer can still do that. But we need to know if it's not the installer, what is being done there. Mo, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I would add too that this should help in theory. Well, of course, we'll see how it all plays out, but help address some of the lack of clarity and double regulation that's occurring. And I'm glad you brought up the installer specifically, Cam, because we've had jurisdictions who do register and license general contractors who require the installer to do so as well with them. And we've had to explain to them that if they're doing installation work as defined in the statute, they are already regulated through our state program to do that. And so if you're also making them register with your jurisdiction as a general contractor, you're basically double regulating them. They're already regulated by us, right? And so with but then at the same time, we also have situations where installers are asked to do more than the simple installation. I'm not saying an installation is simple, but going beyond an installation of a structure to do other GC type work. And some of them have that knowledge and experience and are comfortable doing it. Some of them are not, right? And so for those that are interested in doing that work outside of an installation, more of that site work that Sam was talking about, that OC work as well, that they would then be registered as a building contractor, general contractor with us or that jurisdiction, that they would be regulated to do that work by somebody, but there would be no double regulation occurring. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we see the same thing with like sellers. The statute covers a registration for the sale, but not all this other work that a seller might be doing. And a local jurisdiction could then require them to be registered as general contractor, or if they don't do that, then we would do that. So at some level, somebody is covering that general contractor work for modular, but they're not getting hit twice, and it's not creating confusion with like other work, like an installer's work.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you, Mo. Cam, does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Colorado's kind of a little different place because there's not a statewide general contracting license. Like in most of the other states, the installer, there's not a modular installation registration or license. It's manufactured because it's kind of a different operation with jack stands and earth anchors and stuff. Most of the time, a modular installer is just regulated by the state contractors board under a GC license in most of their states, but Colorado doesn't have that. So this installation program exists, and it's just hard to understand a lot of the time. So, but it sounds like we're under the same program we've always been. We're just trying to duplicate some of the other local layers that are going on. I just wanted to understand that. So that makes a lot of sense.
Great, Cam. I appreciate that. Nate, you've got your hand up?
Unmute here. So the other reason why this was put into the bill is originally it started as a contractor registration for contractors, not installers, but contractors that were going to be finishing, general contracting a project, and that got dialed back during the legislative session. But the other idea here was that contractors could register with the Division of Housing and receive some sort of certification, that basically kind of might give, lending institutions that are looking at the resumes of a building team, that the general contractor is familiar with modular processes, familiar with the Division of Housing's inspection procedures, all the different things that are kind of nuanced for modular. And it wouldn't be a requirement, but it would be something that, maybe over time, banking institutions and financial institutions would look for projects that are, especially certainly larger projects, that were in Colorado, that the general contractor might have this certification from Division of Housing, really just indicating that, that they might have a clue on how to do this. So that was the other reason why this was kind of put into the bill.
And that's why we're requiring, thank you, Nate. That's why we're requiring all contractors, regardless of where they are licensed or registered, to take our education or our approved education. And they, at the end of the day, they get the pretty ready to frame and put on the wall certificate of completion and education that they can use however they want. Okay. And that's where and that's what I just said in 6.4, where we talk about the contractor training. We also talk about the responsibility for on-site construction work, and that the permission for utility connections and other connections to infrastructure will be the responsibility of the local jurisdiction or the Department of Regulatory Agencies. We may need to put, let's flag, Heather, if we need to include in 6.5.3 fire prevention and control. Audits for building contractors, basically looking at their administrative compliance, and we may do some site work inspections, audits, and then fees, no additional fees for the administration portion of the audit. Because they are going to have business insurance and a bond, similar to manufacturers and installers and sellers. Required documentation, we fleshed that out a little bit. And of course, the fleshing out the audits. Any complaints on the work completed by contractors? We haven't numbered the entire chapter 6 yet, but we think that this will help clarify the responsibility, especially in areas of the state, for foundations and site-built hotels, motels in jurisdictions without a building department. Sean.
Yeah, so, consumer complaints, I understand how that all works. Is there any function within this that if, whether it's a contractor, a retailer, or anybody else, if there is a situation where the contractor and the customer aren't coming to agreement on how things should be done or if it's done correctly, is there any ability for either a contractor or retailer to petition the state to do inspections and make a determination?
John, I've not thought about that before. I assume that we have a complaint in writing from a homeowner or it could be a jurisdiction, or that we have a complaint, and then we would do a complaint investigation. That's our normal process. And then if we find that there were errors in site prep or OC, then a correction notice deficiency piece could be sent out. The OC piece of that, we have to work out the responsibility between, we still believe the manufacturer is responsible for the completion of the unit as a whole, and he is going to have a contract with that GC to do that work. If it is a foundation issue or a site prep issue, the local building department is going to be more responsible because that's their jurisdiction, and they're going to do complaints with respect to that. If it's in an area of the state that does not have a building department, that's where we would step up and say, this foundation is not quite right. And we would issue a correction notice for that contractor to fix or remediate that foundation issue. That's the way I see it. If I'm not sure why you could not initiate a complaint investigation. But let's think about I need to think about the wording on that. Donnie's got his hand up. He jumped right in. Donnie, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I guess just based on how we handle things right now, let's just to throw out an example. Let's say that you had an issue with insulation in the attic, and the factory was required to fix that issue, and they wanted to do a replacement of the insulation with blown-in insulation. And the homeowner said, "No, I want spray foam insulation in my attic space." What we would do is determine what the code requirement is, and if that code requirement allows alternate ways of complying with that thermal envelope, we would accept that blown insulation, even though the homeowner wanted to have sprayed foam insulation. What the owner wants doesn't necessarily dictate what the outcome is going to be. It's just whether or not that requirement is code compliant, and if the correction that the manufacturer or the contractor is suggesting for that fix, as long as it meets the code requirement, that's what we're going to go with. We're not going to go with an item just because the homeowner thinks that's going to be the best for their specific home. As long as the code allows for it, we're going to allow that type of fix. I guess does that kind of example and outcome align with what you're looking at, Sean?
Well, I mean, so there's many times where customers think things are incorrect, and they're, in all honesty, they're wrong. But since we're getting into this whole building contractor thing, which kind of really opens things up, and again, there may be some expense to the building contractor or retailer to, open an action with the state for basically a determination whether it meets code or not. Because again, I can sit there all day long and say, hey, this is the way it should be. Here, I can show you it in the book, and they may not agree with you. Rather than getting into, attorneys and legal side of things, if we could basically make I don't want to say a complaint, but a corrective, verification or whatever you want to call it. Maybe it is a complaint. Just to have the state rule on it and say, yep, no, this meets code. I think since it goes one way, it should go both ways, I guess is what I'm saying. Not saying that you're going to get in the middle of a whole bunch of stuff, but it definitely 90% of the time would answer the owner's question if there's a third party that would make that determination of authority.
Okay.
John, that's a good point. And Mo, I see your hand up. Give me just a sec. What we have done in the past is once we issue a correction notice, or deficiency notice to the installer or to the manufacturer, we have set up meetings to work through that to say, yeah, this isn't the manufacturer of the home. It's more of a foundation issue, right? And we've worked through that on those correction notices, and we have modified those correction notices to close them out, right? So there is a 30-day time period to have those discussions on that type. But I do hear you on the other piece of it. Mo?
Yeah, and I thought, John, that's what I was going to ask you to clarify what you meant earlier, but you did a good job of clarifying it pretty clearly. He's not talking about any sort of deficiency, Sam. It's more like an internal management of the client to get them to understand that these are actually code compliant decisions that are being made, even though the customer may disagree with that, and they may or may not have submitted a complaint. I think it's something worth talking more about, Sean. At the end of the day, we want to be helpful as well to prevent things from escalating and becoming complaints, or worse, becoming litigation, and then we get embroiled in that. So the last thing we wanted to do is be acting as someone's expert on the stand in a matter that's being litigated. So we can find ways to diffuse it and help steer the client towards what is actually code compliance, what is actually required by our codes as adopted by the State Housing Board. We'd be more than happy to entertain those conversations. So Sam, I think we can take this offline and talk about it further and come up with some kind of mechanism potentially that's outside of a formal complaint process. Maybe it's simply, Sean requesting and paying for an inspection, right? Or having like a plan review conversation, depending on what the issue is. So Sean, if you got specific examples, I think we can talk through it and figure out what the best mechanism would be to address it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. That would work perfectly, I would think.
Great. Donnie, I think, did you still have your hand up?
I did, but I think we can take the conversation offline and try to walk through that process on what I had.
Yep, I think that's a good idea. Tim, did you have your hand up?
I did, thank you. Yeah, one of the things I run into occasionally through complaint process to my office is problems with quality and aesthetics or things like that. And how I explain that, and I don't know if this can be language that you figure out or if it's even needed, is all we do as a code, AHJ, is enforce the minimum adopted codes. And you kind of alluded to that a little earlier, or the approved set of plans. The approved set of plans maybe be more restrictive for whatever reason, by virtue of the owner or the building owner or architect. So I'm not sure if that kind of language needs to go in, but I get those. I probably get a phone call once a week from usually a homeowner, not usually on the commercial side of things, but I just would throw that out there.
Yeah, and I agree. All right, thanks. We'll take this offline and keep moving. Here is where we talk a little bit about builder contractors and corrective actions. And then we've got placeholders for the education and renewal requirements here for building contractors. Any other concerns on building contractors? Okay. Rule 7, local governments. We ask for audits for participating jurisdictions just to ensure compliance with requirements necessary to maintain their certification of units on our behalf, and particularly to make sure that they are closing out all the insignias that they have received. Local governments may charge fees for inspections not performed by the Division of Housing or other authorized parties on behalf of the Division of Housing. We wanted to clarify that too. And then the other piece is that local governments may not require factory-built structures to be built to a construction code or design standard that's not a code or design standard adopted by the Division of Housing, but that they can do that for things that are external to the completion of the factory-built structure and its installation regarding foundation systems. And as part of the complaint investigation, the division may request inspection records as necessary. Any questions on that? Okay. Other state agencies. We clarified a little bit on plumbing connections. We also provided in 8.3 any certification, inspection, and testing requirements of the factory-built structures after certification is not the responsibility of the division, but it's the responsibility of the applicable state agency. Okay. Rule 9, sellers, we added audits. We added generally.
Hey, Sam.
Yes, I'm sorry, Don, go ahead.
If you go back to 8.2.1, Rule 8.
I'm sorry, which one? 8.2.1?
Rule 8. Yeah. This might be splitting hairs at the bottom. Inspection inspectors of the service side connections must be performed by a licensed plumbing inspector. I'm wondering if we need to change license to certified, or I don't know of any. I was a plumbing inspector for 25 years. I never had a license. So,
Okay.
Mr. McGee might have something to say about that. I know there was talk about requiring plumbing inspectors to be registered licensed plumbers. I think that got waived off, but just, kind of splitting hairs, but just.
No, that's a good point, and we don't want to put something in our rules that isn't the right language. So, does anybody have any other thoughts on that? We'll highlight that to take a look at. John, I was hoping you'd raise your hand.
The statute for the plumbing code allows for certified plumbing for local jurisdictions to use a certified plumber, residential or commercial. They have to have both certifications as far as local jurisdictions are required to have that. So they aren't required to have licensed plumbers do their inspections. That was one thing I brought up here last time, I think, that might be something that would lock them out of being able to do the inspections if they're requiring a licensed plumber when they only have certified people at the local jurisdiction level.
Well, we don't want to lock them out. So would we say licensed or certified plumbing inspector?
Yeah, you could say licensed or certified by a, like the statute says, certified by a recognized national code organization, right? Like ICC or maybe UPC. So, you could put that in there somewhere or another, probably. I could give you the wording out of the statute if you want to look at that and see what that.
Yeah, if you would give us that wording, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll get that for you.
Thank you so much. Mo?
Sure.
The reality is that this is outside of our jurisdiction. So why would we put this in our rules in the first place? This seems like it should be pulled out of the rules and put into something to help educate folks that these are requirements that exist that are outside of our requirements, and that you would have to go to DORA for more information about it or something. But I'm not following why this would be in our rules if it's a compliance issue with another jurisdiction, whether it be local or DORA. Does that make sense? As I think through this.
Right.
I think it's just for clarification that I think maybe what would be better is.
I get it, but the rules are supposed to clarify our statutory requirements, not somebody else's, our rules, right?
Yeah. So if we put plumbing connections not related to completion of factory built structures or installation of factory built structures must be done per local or state DORA requirements, and then keep it like that, just for clarification.
Exactly. Keep it very simple, and then they can go to that local jurisdiction or DORA for what the specific requirements are.
Yep. And
Yeah,
Mo,
you could just put.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Sam. You could just put for state requirements, because all local jurisdictions are required to work under the state.
Yes,
rules and
that's a good point.
regulations.
So don't put state though, because we're state too. So put DORA. Be very specific.
DORA, yeah.
John?
Yeah, and it's not even really, it is a statutory deal. It's not DORA. I mean, we have to enforce the stuff. So it's actually 12-155. If you wanted to just say, inspections for these shall be done, performed for requirements of 12-155. That's a thought.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll take a look at that. Sellers, we talked about that, adding an audit section there. And then any problems with adding audits to sellers, it's already in statute. We just added some rules around that. And then installers, we added audits there. And so you see the changes to the rules in 10.33 and 10.40. And again, we'll have a page in this audit handbook or a section for sellers audits with more details. And then for install, I'm sorry, we're on installers. We'll have sections for each type of audits that we're doing in the audit handbook. And then the registered audits, registered installers are going to be audited twice a year, and certified installers are audited once annually. And then we'll look at post-audit enforcement requirements also in chapter Rule 12. We're going to be meeting with our attorney and see if she's recommends any other changes to that enforcement rule. Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Looking at the time, I just want to keep rolling if we can. Local survey results. Andre, I think you're up.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be able to share these with you today. Can you go to the next slide, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So to remind everybody, we've had a survey going for a little bit. It ran for about a month. I want to stop and say thank you to the folks. There's many people on this call that participated directly in that survey or encouraged folks to participate in that survey. Ended up being, in my mind, a pretty substantial success. So our focus in gathering this data was to address some things that we presented back in October when discussing the design criteria questions, and then what we kind of classified as code trigger questions as well. Some discussion that's germane to some of the topics that you've had for today. But our focus areas on this included snow load and wind load practices, climate zone, frost depth, winter design temperatures. Obviously, that one comes up a little bit later. Fire, WUI, radon, and sprinkler requirements. So for those of you that took the survey, we tried to ask a full gamut of questions that captured sort of where your jurisdiction was and where you intended to go in a time frame that made sense for the decision-making requirements of the TAC. Ultimately, what I can say is that at first pass on the data, and I will say it is a first pass, we've had it for a week, and there is some verification that we're working on to make sure that we have a high level of confidence of what we got back. For those of you that took the survey, you know that we had some open-ended questions there, and with any open-ended question, you get an open-ended answer sometimes, and you have to go figure out exactly what that means. So there's some follow-up contact that'll be done in the next coming weeks, and this won't be the last you see of this. But ultimately, what we can say is that this regionalized approach is generally supported by the data that we were able to take back, and we have some interesting results that hopefully will help clarify some of your questions or give you some insights, maybe confirm some of the things that you were already thinking about trends regionally. So next slide, sir. So from the survey data alone, we received 98 jurisdictions responses. This was a broad cross-section of the state. We received counties, regionalized building departments, cities and counties with no building department. And we received small towns, we received mountain towns, folks in the plains. Good mix of folks participate in the survey, which also speaks to the idea here that people are interested in what's going on with this TAC, and they're interested about the direction of this decision to be made about design criteria locally. After we removed any duplicates and cleaned the data up, we found 95 individual responses from these jurisdictions. But it's also important to remember that prior to us building the survey, we were already trying to solicit data from a number of jurisdictions throughout the state. And so combining that with the data that our admin team was able to solicit, we got a good mix here, a matrix of 137 total jurisdictions that at least had one data point for us to be able to work with in this, representing just a little shy of half the state. So ultimately, I'd say that we really did get a good data set to be able to work with and start to make some determinations about what it contains. Next slide, sir. So we have maintained a cleaning process for the data to make sure that it's auditable. If we go back and somebody says, "Hey, how'd you come up with this?" That we can effectively answer that, right? So I already talked about the fact we removed some duplicates. We had to make sure that we were standardizing our responses for snow load, wind load, because as you can imagine, we can get that in all kinds of different ways. We can get that with exposure category. We can get that for certain risk categories. We sometimes receive ground snow load and roof snow load, sometimes only one of the two. And then, of course, these open-ended responses that needed to be normalized into analyzable categories. So we ended up taking a tack where we took very strict and conservative measures. So, for instance, some of the questions asked things like, "Are you updating your codes?" And so unless somebody said an express yes, their answer was categorized as an unsure or a no, right? In order to be able to capture that. Doesn't mean that someone might still decide to do that within the timeline that they said, well, we weren't sure, we're not necessarily certain, but they weren't categorized as a yes. But obviously, in order to do that, we want to make sure that we're making very clear rules about how we've been analyzing that data so there are no surprises. Next slide, sir. So here's some of the findings that we were able to come back with. 83% of respondents said, hey, we are not planning on updating design criteria before the January 31st deadline here that DOH is obviously using for the TAC decision-making process. 63% were not planning on updating their codes in the first month of 2026 here. Now, I do believe that that number does change as you look a little further in the year for a number of other statutory targets, but not in that first month at least. Now, over 70%, excuse me, of respondents basically said, hey, we don't have a special wind zone or require adjustment for topographic effects. So that's been of key concern to understand exactly when we make this regionalized wind loading decision, are there still going to be places or individual locations or jurisdictions that might need to play with those numbers or say that those numbers aren't adequately reflective of their jurisdiction? So 70% responding no, I think is of substantial consequence for us to understand where the state's at. 71% also said that they do require ice barrier on roofs. Pretty typical. I wouldn't say that's a surprise for most code officials working in Colorado, but nonetheless. Next slide, sir. On fire sprinklers, we found 69% of respondents saying that they do not require fire sprinklers for 1 and 2 family dwellings. But if we jump over to townhomes, a third of respondents said that they would require fire sprinklers for townhomes, with another 20% saying they have some sort of additional conditional clause for that. That could be the size of the unit, that could be the number of units together, that could be certain locations. And so again, this goes back to that categorization of data and making sure with these open-ended answers that we're trying to capture broadly anyone who says that they have some reasonable threshold or some level that they trigger that. Otherwise, if it's an outright no, it wouldn't be counted. 49% of respondents say that they do rely on their fire district entities for triggering sprinkler requirements, meaning that they might not have a requirement, say for townhomes or single-family residences, to have sprinkler systems, but their local fire jurisdiction may have multiple things in their zoning ordinances or for lack of water, access permits, those sorts of things, to be cause to require fire sprinklers, which makes our fire districts very important stakeholders in the conversation regarding fire sprinkler systems. Next slide. We also asked for respondents to tell us, hey, are there any fire sprinkler system types that you specifically allow or do not allow? The vast majority do allow some form of an NFPA 13D or 13R system. The most response we got was no response, and that actually is commensurate with the answer that we had before, which is that most jurisdictions aren't requiring fire sprinklers generally. However, most jurisdictions are allowing any code-approved method for residential fire sprinkler systems. That's 13D, 13R, P2904. Some do limit that to only 13 systems. And again, that might also be part of that relationship with that fire district, I think is kind of the trend that we're seeing here. Next slide, please. So 34% of jurisdictions are saying that they have adopted the Wildfire Resiliency Code, with another 17% saying that they've adopted the IWUI code. Now, what that tells me likely is that these were the early adopters, that 17% that have had something for some time prior to the state's actions to set up the WRC. But right now, that's really just kind of anecdotal from people that I've spoken to. That's not captured in this data set, so I do want to be clear about that. 26% are actively under the process of considering adoption for their wildfire code. 63% have, or excuse me, 66%, two-thirds have said they don't intend to modify the map by January 31st. The January 31st deadline is also commensurate with the state's process on that too. So for those answering, I don't know if they've had contact with DFPC to discuss that and find out, hey, the timeline will take longer than that. Anything about the specifics of an approach to that was not captured in that data. So again, I just want to be clear about what that contains. 73% of respondents are directly relying on the fire districts again for the implementation of WRC or IWUE requirements. So I'm sure that's defensible space, but some of that may also relate to some of the construction practice related issues. So again, fire districts may have seen some of the sides of working with the manufactured housing questions that we've been coming up with as maybe like third rail or not directly involved with them. But we're definitely seeing a trend that the departments that they'll be working with on a regular basis will be very closely tied in to what their decisions are. Next slide. So the snow loading analysis that we've run up to this point is based on the version 2 analysis that Donnie presented you some time ago, right? And so we've used that to basically calibrate for corresponding snow load region band to determine the efficacy of the design. So what we really wanted to do here is use the survey data to validate regional consistency, right? And make sure that these things were in alignment between the paradigm chosen by DOH and if there's additional refinement that could be done. One of the things that we found that was particularly interesting is that in the responses that we received, and this was again an open response question, less than 10% of survey respondents specifically noted ASCE or SEAC data to be used for specific conditions. So that, upping that or getting a more robust response that could be a tool for dealing with site-specific data might be of concern or consequence to the TAC kind of moving forward about educating folks about, the tools that are available, especially with some jurisdictions that were responding who have historically not had building codes and are either recently implementing them for the first time or are entertaining the adoption of building codes. So we had one, for instance, Prowers County responded in that fashion. So next slide, please. So what we have here is the worst case scenario. Basically, whatever you answered, and we had a lot of answers in this that were ranges that said, hey, we vary anywhere between 40 pounds per square foot and 225 pounds per square foot, which for some of the jurisdictions, that makes absolutely perfect sense. So this first map just shows you, hey, these places have at least one locality that they're saying, hey, this is at least a level 5 site specific. The counties here that are listed that have a name but no coloring, those are counties that chose not to specifically answer this question. So we got data from them, just not particularly for this point. Otherwise, those captured showing region 1, region 2. This doesn't also dissuade the issue of an individual jurisdiction that might have a high snow load point. Take, for instance, Montrose, right? It has a couple of ski resorts in that area last I checked, right? So we know we have some towns up there that are of consequence. We just didn't get those data points from them. But we do know that we'd have some areas approaching Gunnison that are going to be in that, that 5 category as well. Next slide. So from there, we ended up breaking this down and doing a comparative layer cake, just like what you were shown by Donnie when this was first created, to show what would the capture rate be. And this is just based solely on the survey data. So when we took those variant ranges, we assigned a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, whatever was germane to that particular locale. Right. And so here you can see, based on the data that we got, the capture rate for region 1 arguably is going to be the whole state, without question. But there will be some localities that start at 2 or 3, and we'll see that actually. Next slide, please. We see a few counties there that do show that they start in the level 2 category, right? So again, this is capturing level 2 data and layer caking it in. So as we move up in elevation, commensurately, we're going to see those higher snow loads as expected. Let's see here. Slide 3, please. And here again, we see a continuation of the same trends. We have some of these same areas increasing in snow load, but ultimately, when compared with the maps that you were shown with Donnie originally, pretty similar to exactly what the SEAC and ASCE data was showing you to some degree. Next slide, please. Here again, we see a continuation here, and you notice there was not much change at all between Region 3 and Region 4. And this starts to parse out some of the conversation to be had out of this data, which is that is the difference in granularity there necessary? Adding additional granularity can offer bands that are useful for manufacturers to be able to design in. And if we're not seeing significant trend differences between, say, Regions 3 and Regions 4, that might be cause to scrutinize those. And so that was exactly the kind of data that we were hoping to solicit out of this, is a better understanding of if those bands kind of match practices and realities. Next slide, please. And here again, we have areas with snow loading with just Region 5. These have site specifics. Now, like I said before, we have a number of jurisdictions that participated that also are going to be in the Region 5 data. These are just areas where we could attribute a at least county level discussion on that to be kind of matching data for the maps that Donna created. So, next slide, please. On our wind loading, we had a very high capture rate in Region 1. This is the data from the ASCE 22 hazard tool that I went ahead and mapped out so you could have sort of a comparative analysis on this, and you're not going to see much in the way of color changing here. So using the 105 data, roughly speaking, you can see a lot of jurisdictions here, 104, 105, 106, right? Early 100s for wind speed is what's noted here pretty pervasively. And then if we go to our next slide. This is our wind speed that we received from survey data, and it's nearly identical in a lot of places. We have a couple of outlier jurisdictions there, but ultimately most places are captured in that Region 2 category, and this is a wind loading of worst case scenario again. So I just want to be clear, this goes up to our Region 5 areas, our Region 4 areas, etc. And this doesn't also capture all instances of folks that might have a variant or tolerance. So, for instance, some of these jurisdictions may have a specific area that they attribute to a special wind region. That goes back to that survey answer that we had previously, that 70% don't, but 30% do, and that 30% may very well matter in that category. So, like I said, this is a first look at the data that we've been able to parse out from this. And arguably, what we can say with that is that we have an extremely high capture rate for Region 1 for our wind loading map. Some of the other regions, Regions 2, Regions 3, if they're discernibly different from an engineering standpoint, it makes perfect sense to keep. But at least from a practicality standpoint of how many jurisdictions are using them, you could look to maybe shrink some of those granular columns if you chose to, right? And make it a little bit more of a wide swath. So, I had a conversation with some of the folks about this saying, hey, would it make more sense to have 3 wind speed regions or 4 wind speed regions as opposed to more granularity in the snow loading column where there might be more impact on engineering? Now, this is all just conjecture. This was just first kind of passed from this data. But ultimately, what I'll come back with is, again, the data that we received in a practical basis does seem to support the overall paradigm chosen by DOH to move forward with. And there are some specific instances where you could question whether or not the categories that we've created are perfect captures as you'd like, or if for administrative efficiency, it makes sense to keep it as is. So I think that that's kind of one of the questions to be balanced. But that is sort of my full report at this point. Like I said, I'll be bringing more back to you in the future. I think that's my last slide, right, Sam?
It is.
All right.
So, any questions for Andre or his team? Thanks, Andre. Thanks, SCA.
Great job, Andre.
Thank you.
Audit outlines. We've got about 30 minutes left. We kind of want to roll through some of this. I've alluded to this quite a bit already today. We are going to look at 3 main areas for audits of manufacturers: the registration, the actual in-plant construction, and then quality assurance and control process. Tracy, you've got your hand up. I'm sorry. And then I saw it go away. Tracy, did you have a question or not?
I did. Sorry about that. So I didn't see the maps that Andre was just showing in your deck. Did I miss it?
We sent out another slide deck Friday afternoon, and I believe all the slides were in there. But we can get
Oh,
it to you, Tracy, if you didn't see it. Did
oh,
anybody
I'll
else
go.
not get this updated
I must
slide
be
deck
looking,
with
I
the?
might be looking at the wrong deck then. I'll go and look for the second one that was sent out.
Okay, thank you. Let us know, Tracy. We'll send it to you again.
Okay.
All right, audits, manufacturers, and our objectives, of course, is to verify the current registration status and information in the manufacturer registration, compliance with the construction plans, and then taking a look at the QA and QC system. Third-party plan reviews or approvals, focusing in 3 areas: compliance on behalf of DOH, verify that consistency and compliance, mitigating life and safety risks, quality control, consistency. We think we will be auditing 20% of TPAs that have become certified of their approved plans per year. And then 100% of registered TPA reviewed plans. And that would just be a screening. Our goal is to take a look at every plan set that is filed to make sure that it is in alignment with the design criteria regions and the code set and some other type of simple screening of those TPA plans. Key objective is to ensure TPAs perform plan review and approval services accurately, consistency, and in compliance with DOH standards. In-plant inspectors, we will take a look at that are third parties, design and make sure that the inspectors verify the plans meet approved standards, the structural integrity, energy efficiency with the correct IECC standards, and system testing. Third-party in-plant inspections, we will ensure that TPAs perform in-factory inspection services accurately, consistently, in compliance with DOH standards. And we will look at the inspector's QA/QC review process and verify compliance during in-plant inspections. Focusing for the on-site inspectors, 2 main areas, the actual monitoring on-site, inspections against the approved plans, and then the QA/QC review process and discrepancy handling, again, referencing those approved plans, and third-party agency inspection label placement for on-site work. And key objective there, of course, is to monitor on-site inspection activities and verify compliance during on-site inspections. Audit to sellers, of course, we want to take a look at the registration paperwork that comes in annually. We want to take a look at the contract review. We will randomly look at least 3 contracts from the previous year based on reports we get from the sellers to make sure the required statutory language is in those contracts. And then we will look at if they're holding down payments and the timelines for transferring those funds to the manufacturer to make sure that's in compliance also. Installers, focusing on the 3 main areas, administrative documentation, of course, the installation for certified installers, and then reporting installations to DOH. Key objectives, again, just to make sure that everything is being done per statute, reviewing the required contract language, and confirm financial surety and insurance paperwork, and again, taking a look at some of the installations for certified installers. Installation inspectors will focus on two main areas, just the documentation and maintaining compliance with reporting. And again, you will get to see more of this audit detail on the meeting on the 21st. On-site construction inspectors, four main areas: adherences to procedures, discrepancy resolution, use of approved plans, unit labeling, and validating completion reporting. I know I'm rocking through these a little bit. Please let me know if you want me to pause and discuss anything. Feel free to send in any written comments you want. And we'll go to, that is all we have right now on audits. Again, more to come. The need to discuss more fire suppression. There's two areas here. We're going to talk about fire suppression and winter design temps. Donnie, do you want to start working through some of this fire suppression stuff?
Yeah, I can do that. All right. Okay, so fire suppression. I think fire suppression and winter design temperatures seem to be the two most difficult design criteria to really regionalize. We can have some, I guess, easy decisions on them, but do those easy decisions create more conflicts with possible local design criteria amendments that they may have made? And so, just as an example, an easy decision would be like defer the requirements for fire suppression for single-family dwellings to the locals, right? Just do you require it, yes or no? And if they require it, then that fire suppression system would comply with what codes we adopt. So if they say, hey, we do require it, and then our code says that you can do a 2904 or a 13D for residential structures, but there might be a local amendment, as you've seen from the survey, that some locals actually amended their codes or their ordinances to exempt a 2904 system, right? They may only allow a 13D system. And so, that easy decision might create a conflict with that local jurisdiction. And if we said, well, we allow it, and they say they don't allow it, out of the two, their design criteria would be more stringent. But we wouldn't want to create a situation where we approve the plan with the 2904 and then it arrives to the local jurisdiction and it's required to have a 13D system. We would have to know all that information up front, right? But I guess on the easier side of things, when it comes to commercial, we would just follow what the IBC Chapter 9 requires. It'll tell you specifically what structures require fire suppression. There will be some situations where a local jurisdiction did amend their code for IBC to maybe not necessarily exempt structures from fire suppression, but there might be a requirement that kind of widens that requirement for not needing fire suppression for this specific instance, but once you exceed that, then it does require fire suppression per Chapter 9. A good example of that, I believe, down in Chaffee County, I think there's a project that we had where they had a R3 exemption for 4 units or less, although the building code requires fire suppression for all residential structures under the IBC to have fire suppression. Their specific amendment exempted fire suppression for those specific types of projects. So there are just easy decisions that we can make that would make the process, I guess, somewhat easy to implement, but there's going to be a lot of variabilities that we're going to have to consider at the local level. And so I'm not sure if the easy decisions are going to be helpful. Some of those hard decisions that we're going to have is, again, need to consider site-specific information. Maybe we do allow a certain type of fire suppression system in our code, but the locals amended their code to say, hey, we don't allow this type of fire suppression system, and this is why. But one of those reasons why they may not require some of those specific fire suppression systems is because there's a a specific requirement for water sources. I know that I talked to one local jurisdiction. I can't remember which one it was, but I know that they had a all-around requirement for fire suppression in their jurisdiction, but there's a specific development that because of the water supply in that area, they actually had to use a certain type of design. I think they had to have a water source on site for that specific structure for the fire suppression. So again, another thing that although we make it an easy decision that, hey, do we just need a yes or no? There are some underlying things that might affect that design. Again, local design criteria. One thing that I'm working with Shums Coda on, and also we'll have further conversations with the Colorado Fire, is what is the design criteria? Like, what do you consider design criteria? To me, 2904, 13D, 13R, those are design criteria for a fire suppression system. And then when you go into those specific requirements, it will tell you how to create that specific system, right? That requirement those specific requirements to build that system, that would be the code, but the design criteria is that specific system itself, right? But there might be, somebody might come and say, hey, we don't allow a 2904. Well, that is a design criteria. Why is that an exemption, or why do you exempt that alternate method, right? Why are you not allowing that? Those are conversations we'll have to have with those specific jurisdictions, but maybe we can get some more clarification, more background from other code officials and try to figure out why that is what it is, right? We also need to figure out what are the qualifications of installers, plan reviewers, and inspectors, right? A lot of local jurisdictions don't have plan reviewers and inspectors that specialize in fire suppression systems. Just like the Division of Housing, we don't have individuals that specialize in NFPA 13 systems, right? How do we know that we are approving plans that are adequate enough for that system and ensuring that it's going to be compliant when it arrives on site, right? What are going to be those requirements for the installers? How do we know that they are actually doing what they need to install those systems properly? 2904 systems considered plumbing. If you're a licensed plumber, chances are you already have the experience of installing that type of system. But one thing that I've heard is that there's actually a lot of plumbers that kind of want to keep their hands off of doing that type of system. And so some local jurisdictions understand that, and that's why they don't allow the 2904s, because there's just some items within that requirement for the 2904 that plumbers won't do. So they just go with 13D. For single family dwellings. And also the inspection, same thing. How do we know that the inspector is qualified or has the experience enough to sign off on those types of systems? Sam, you have a question?
The reason 2904 doesn't get used very often, I mean, we've required sprinklers for a long time, is the insurance for the plumber goes sky high. And so that's the, I mean, they're plumbing, plumber's insurance. So that's why you don't see it as much, although, and until that kind of gets organized, I mean, they're a perfectly good system, but the plumbers don't want to do them because they don't want to pay that insurance for the few that they have to do, and so that's the reason. And I think jurisdictions have reacted to that and say, well, we're just going to not even try to have that in there because we don't see them anyway. So they rely on their fire districts who have fire protection engineers and stuff to actually do the plan review and inspections. I mean, that's how I understand it anyway.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on that one? Or any questions? All right, let's move to the next one. All right, winter design temperatures. I think the easiest decision that's on this winter design temp is that a winter design temperature, or the design temperature for the heat requirements or heating requirements for that specific unit. We just make it site specific, right? That's the easy decision. But the whole idea is to try to create these regions that if I design a structure to a specific winter design temp, is there an allowance? Is there a known allowance? Can I have a deviation of 1 or 2 degrees or 5 degrees, 10 degrees, right? If we're able to do that, it'd be easier to design a structure. Let's just say we design a structure to meet a 0-degree winter design temp, and that entire system is built and designed based on a 0-degree winter design temp, or the dry bulb, right, temperature. And if there's a variance, and let's say it's designed to the 0 degrees, but it goes to a jurisdiction where their jurisdiction is -5, right? Would I still be able to install that unit as designed and still meet that local jurisdiction's requirements? And that's really unknown, I guess. There are some items that I did find through some research that they're actually on the ACCA websites, articles that they have from some designers or some mechanical professionals that say that a 5-degree variation is not a big difference, but anything greater than 5 degrees would need a redesign, right? But we can't just use that. We need a little more research and see why that is. There might be something specifically in the ACCA book that directly says that, like, if there's a variation of 5 degrees, there's not a big difference, and it's allowed, we can go ahead and move forward with that, or just reference that specific section if it was ever questioned. That the actual design handbook that lays out how you need to design these systems gives that variance. Andre.
Thanks, Donnie. In the research that I've been looking at on this, and I will not pretend to be a mechanical engineer, but from what I've been seeing is that a 5%-ish, or excuse me, a 5-degree change in that is around a 7%, give or take. It depends on a lot of climate factors, but a 7% change in the heating capacity for that home. And then as you get upwards around 7, 8, 9% of that, it starts to be the threshold or capacity between, say, the heat pump that you'd have selected for that manual J versus maybe the furnace that you'd selected, like those tiers that the manufacturers typically have for increasing the amount of BTUs. You're kind of getting close to approaching that, and I think that's kind of where that comes from. I couldn't find anything that expressly said, like, hey, 5 degrees or more becomes just a straight up problem, only because it's codified in rule, so to speak, on that, because they do want to be very bespoke. But it's just the practical implication of above a certain threshold, you start to get into where you'd be selecting the next size up for your mechanical appliance.
Yeah, and that's why I said you can find articles that mention that 5 degrees, but you can't really find the specific section in the actual handbook that designers use to design these systems. So if we could find something more concrete, I think we would have something a little more, at least something better to use when we create maybe not a region, but we say, hey, these are the tolerances that are acceptable, right? So if a structure was built to a 0 degree, like, hey, we have a plus or -5 variance within that. So next thing is if we create our own tolerances using data that we found using like the ACCA handbook on mechanical designs. But one of the other things that I was considering is if we are designing a system to meet a 97.5 percentile on efficiency for that, or at least the winter design temperature, that winter design temperature is at a 97.5 percentile for that average for that specific location. Let's say you design it to meet 97.5, but it goes to a jurisdiction, but it's between 97.5 and 100% of that winter design temperature. At least logically speaking, or hypothetically speaking, you would, if it's between 97.5 and 100%, you're either that structure or that unit's going to be efficient or more efficient because it's being designed to at 97.5% of that average or 100% of that average, right? For that specific site. So you would think that would give us a range, but that's just my thought process, and I need to do a little more research and see if there's even correct, right? And if that's creating a more efficient unit, I guess, is that something that's hopefully not going to cause any other issues down the road? I think Energy Star uses a 99 percentile for their data, and if you do the look into how they calculate their averages, they actually round their averages to the nearest. I think it's the next highest not percentile, the degrees for that specific site location. So if it was negative 2.15, I think they go to -3, right? If it was a positive 2.15, they would go to 3 degrees. I believe that's how they average theirs out. There's actually a little snip underneath the calculations of how they came up with those numbers above the table. So, but again, this is just some background that I'm trying to do to see if we can create these. But if not, this is going to be a hard one to really create a region. I think we're going to have to use site specific because that's how they are. Those mechanical units are designed. They're designed for that specific location. There's not a known range that we can plug in here. So, any questions on that? No? Okay.
All right, thanks, Donnie. So just reiterate our rulemaking schedule. In addition to the other meetings that we're going to talk about here in just a second, March 11th is we expect to have our comprehensive draft proposed rules sent out to TAC and interested parties. March 18th, meeting for the TAC and interested parties to discuss and finalize the proposed rules. March 31st, the final notice of the proposed rules for rulemaking will be filed. And then May 5th is the public rulemaking hearing, which I talked about earlier, and adoption by the State Housing Board. May 25th is file the adopted rules after a legal review has been completed. And June 10th, adopted rules published in the Colorado Register for an effective date of June 30th. Next meeting, January 21st. Please note that it's in an earlier time. It's 9 to 11. Continued discussion on rulemaking 2. And this will be the regional design criteria and edits needed based on that local survey. Look at edits to the administrative rules again. We'll look at GC licensing and education requirements. And review the responsibility matrices and then finalize the audit processes. So we'll spend most of our time in the later part of this slide with just a brief review of where we are on the first couple things. And that's what we're going to try to get done for the next meeting. Then February 4th, the 18th, there are 2 meetings in February. And then March 4th and 18th is our final 2 meetings of the TAC. With respect, and I'm going to look at, that lines up with the March 18th meeting. So the end is in sight. So far, I think we're just still got a lot of work to iron out, but we have data now. Thank you, Seamus Coda. We have an outline or kind of a first draft of the administrative rules that we know need tweaking. We need to fill out the responsibility matrix, the contractor education, some of that stuff, but I think we are on a good track to get that done. With that said, I will now take my last swig of coffee and see if there's any other comments or concerns or questions on how things are going, either from TAC members or members of the public. Okay, well, I'm going to give you a few minutes back on your day. I am going to stop recording right now. Thank you all for your time.